In today's video, we're going to design a puzzle. Hi, piecers, it's Kaye England again, back with you to share some really fun techniques. Now, I am a huge fan of teaching the grid. And when I refer to the grid, I refer to the size of an element that runs across a block. And I've had loads of questions about this, so we decided that we would just create a puzzle today. So here's the way I want you to think. Everyone knows what a tic-tac-toe board looks like. That is, in patchwork terms, would be referred to as a three-patch, meaning three wide east and west, and or a nine-patch, which is the total of the elements that live within the block. So you could build 9 patches, which would be 3 by 3 grids. You could build a 4-patch, which would be 4 by 4 grids, and on and on and on it goes. If this can set in your mind, I tell you that virtually everyone from beginner on can make great quilts. Because what you can do is be your own designer, and you don't have to rely on a pattern specifically. You just say, wait a minute, I want to know how I get there. So what I'm going to do today is talk to you about how I use the specialty rulers. Now, if you decide you're going to do this traditionally, then the math changes totally. So what makes the rulers so fabulous, and I'm working with the Good Measure rulers today, the rulers with a cause, and what makes them work so well is the fact that all of this math lives in the tool. So I just have to decide in my tic-tac-toe board, how large do I want one of those squares to be? 2, cut a strip 2.5. 3, cut a strip 3.5. If you decided you wanted that square to be 3.25, add a 1/2 inch and cut a strip. So the only thing you need to have in your mind is you are going to be adding a 1/2 inch to what you want. But when you do your design, only think in finished terms. So I'm going to reference 2s and 4s. I'm working with the new Rhapsody in Red fabric collection that's in stores as we speak. And so what I did was I cut 2.5 and 4.5 inch strips off of a wide assortment of fabrics that live in that collection. Now, the reason the 2 and the 4 works is 2 is half of 4. But if you do the math, like, okay, I cut a 4.5, what's half of 4.5? 2.25. That will not work. You must do your thinking without seam allowances. So do a 1-to-2 ratio, 2 to 4, 3 to 6, 4 to 8. I'm working today in nothing but 2 to 4s. So let's take a look at what's on the table. I cut a bunch of 2.5 inch strips, so everything that lives on this side, I built out of 2.5 inch strips. And everything that lives on this side, I built out of 4.5 inch strips. But I'm 2.5 and 4.5 up here. I'm not even thinking seam allowance right now. So once I did that, I got all these things out of the way. Now, you know I love my stiletto even though I'm not sewing. So if we kind of look here on the table, you can tell that this is a 2.5 inch square, and this is a 4.5 inch square. So from every size strip, I cut each of these elements. So I cut 2.5 inch squares and I cut 4.5 inch squares. I cut 2.5 inch half squares. I cut 4.5 inch half squares. And I cut spiky units. They only came out of the 4.5s because they're see how they're 4 tall? Well, they're actually 4.5, but I'm going to reference 4. And they're 4 tall, while this is 2 tall. So do you see how simple this breaks down? So I used Out of my 2.5-inch strip, I cut half square triangles and quarter square triangles to make flying geese. I cut only quarter square triangles to make my economy block, which is 4 quarter square triangles living in an element. Right here, I got clever. I used 2 squares, 2 sets of half square triangles, and this little guy I'll show you in a minute, he's just another square folded in 4s, and he's tucked in there, so he's actually loose like that. So that's just tucked in, and then I did the same thing here. This is a 4 patch, just like this fellow, except he doesn't have half squares. Here I got clever, and I used a 4.5 half square, a 2.5 square, and the 2.5 half squares. And see, if you were to just think 2 and 2 is 4, you would see how easy this would be to build, and you have to do your thinking without seam allowances or you're going to drive yourself crazy. On the spiky elements, they come out of my larger strip, my 4.5, but they're going to finish 4 inches tall. And if you take a look right here on the half rectangle, there is a left and a right. When you cut sets of this element, you're going to get a left and a right, which is what lives in this block. But occasionally I want these to be standalone guys. And when I want that, I have to think in terms of, is it a set or is it a single? In the half rectangle element, this is the half rectangle tool. And if you look at this, when I lay it down on this piece right here, even though you might not be able to see all the words, the ruler is right side up, the writing on the ruler. For the other guy, the ruler has to be wrong side up in order to deliver the alternate, which means if you cut them with the 2 fabrics right sides together or wrong sides together, you get a set. But sometimes I only want a left, and sometimes I only want a right. And let me tell you folks how you'll figure this out. You'll cut a bunch wrong, which I've done plenty of times, and then that'll teach you which way it works. But this is just a little alert button that'll help you. So I've made all of these different components, and you're like, why was it gonna make? This is where the fun comes in. If I could get everyone watching this to cut some of everything I've shown you, we can start building quilt blocks. So I forgot to add a rectangle. I also cut a rectangle. Now it's a 2x4, so I could get it out of the 2.5-inch strip, cutting it this way, and I got it out of the 4.5-inch strip, cutting it that way. Now let's start putting puzzles together. And by the way, I do love putting puzzles together. This is the traditional tic-tac-toe board. This is nothing but 9 of my squares. And I recommend when you're cutting, cut 4 of everything you cut, then you can build a block a little bit easier. So I have 4 of that color, 4 of that color, and 4 of that color. Now I can play all day long. So that's my traditional 9-patch block. And I could make this with the 2s or the 4s, and it would just be larger. So now just for grins, let's pull out 4 of the squares, and then let's come over, and I'm not going to worry so much now about whether I have the exact same color. I'm just going to have them oriented properly. So I'm going to put this guy there. Now, I could do this fellow with the colors all right. I also could do this one right here by putting all of the triangles this way, and I have a completely different block. So right there, we did 3 blocks with this silly little thing. So I could use any of these elements. I could even, what if I did this and got rid of these guys? And then what if I picked up my rectangles, and let's get light rectangles just for grins. What am I going to need to live in the center? I'm going to have one of my larger blocks. Now, see what we've got here? This is a traditional patchwork block, but all I'm doing is just laying components down till I see something I like or don't like. Now, I could end up right there taking that big square out, and I could put this fellow in here, and I've just designed another block. Now, let's just take the 4 squares or 4 rectangles out, and let's just take 4. I would have to change these. Let's see if I can. Now, see, I'm just playing. I have no idea what I'm going to do here. I'm going to pick up because I have, see, these are opposite. So when I lay this down, I'm going to have to be real careful because see how that's going to form points? I'm going to do the other 2 this way. And, well, I've just designed another block. Now, if I had had all 4 lefts or all 4 rights, I would have gotten a different block. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave my 4 patch in the center, I think. Well, who knows? I never know what I'm going to do. Let's see how we like this way. Let's just build us a big old fun, oh gosh, like a big old star. Now, we're still in our 9 patches now. Oh, I could put big squares there. I could put this kind of unit there. Oh, but I like that unit in the middle. Ooh, I like that. Now look what I could do. I could put 2 of my rectangles together and I'd have another block. I would just need 2 rectangles sewn together. This center could be this guy. It could be this guy. It could be any of these things. So those are just a sample of our 9 patch. I said I wasn't going to make another 9 patch, but I couldn't stand it because look at this one. I used 4 of my half rectangle bias triangle units. Now I'm going to pick up, and they're 4, so they've got to be, the fillers have to be 4. So I'm going to pick these. I might have to make this. And now see, I've got choices about how I could put my light in, but see if I put my dark in because I'm light there. And see how I get to design. I don't have to know that this was a pattern in order to create this. Now I can come back and go, what's 4 that'll fit in the middle? Oh, my little quarter square. Oh, look at that. I just designed another fabulous block. And I'm not even saying these live or don't live in the archive of pattern books, but who cares? It can live in your archive. And that is another 9 patch. But it's really easy for me to change my grid and make it something different. Okay, I can't stand it. I'm going to make another 9 patch. But I'm telling you, because I'm telling you, the tic-tac-toe board will become your best friend, because look at what I can do. I can actually put rectangles. See, I make a mess here in about 5 minutes. I've got a mess where I can't find anything. I've got my lights right here. Now what I'm going to do, these aren't going to be equal 9 patches. Now forget, there's going to be somebody watching this going, oh, I don't like that color. I'm not even remotely thinking color here, folks. I'm trying to get you to think design. Take a look at this. By not making these all squares, I moved a rectangle in here. So this could be a 2 squares sewn together. I could have 2 of different colors in there, but look at what my rectangle does. Now my center could be a triangle, but most likely I'd put a square in there. Well, look at that. That's created a killer block. And again, I could decide that I don't want this to be this little flower unit. I could want all of these 4 patches running in the directions, and I'll just move a couple in here so you can see that. And see how I could create kind of that ladder running through there if I played around with this. Now, remember when I told you in the beginning I'd sew 4 of everything? Well, I didn't do that. I sewed 2 of some things and 4 of something. So you have to, in your mind, pretend that all 4 of these flying geese are the exact same. See, here's where it gets really fun. Now I've moved into a 4-patch design, because if I were to put squares in the corner, I'm actually 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm a 4 patch now. I've gotten rid of although I love the little 3 patches, I've moved on past that. So this center has got to be 4 because 2 and 2 is 4. So my choices are put a square in there. My choices could be to put a 4 patch in there. My choices could be to put a pieced unit with half square triangles, and on that goes. The star made with 4 flying geese and 4 corner blocks is probably one of the most used designs in patchwork. And that puts us in a 4 patch. You're probably going, oh, she made another tic-tac-toe board. No, I didn't. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I now have a 5 patch block. And the only thing I did was take 4 of these little guys, and even though these are different, there's 2 lefts and 2 rights. See how if you were to set this block on point when you were done, look how fun that is. And now my decision is I have to pick a square to live in the middle. I mean, I just arbitrarily grab a square, put it in the center. Well, that looked pretty good, isn't it? It's that same thing right there. So let me show you while I have this color, how I achieve this guy. Is I take a square that is the exact same size as the base square, which at this point we know is a 2, and I fold it in half twice, and then I set all the raw edges against the raw edges, and then it sits right there. So this is very easy to achieve. It is a little bulky when you start to sew, and what you'll find out, and I'll show you on the back side, sometimes you're going to have to open that seam to distribute some of the bulk, and then sometimes, I do it sometimes and sometimes I don't. You're going to have to send it the way it wants to go, which might not be the preference that you would have. So if you took a look at the same thing, look how much fun it would be if I decided in this little fellow to pull out, oh, see, I love this element. I love it where it's a 1-to-2 ratio. I used the 2.5-inch cuts for here, and then the other side was my 4.5-inch cuts. And see, I could create an entire different block. And sometimes when you're doing your design work, don't think in terms of it being, I just like the way the block looks laying on the table. It's how the block's going to look when it goes in the quilt that might be the determining factor. So many times I'll design not thinking particularly about the block, but about the quilt. Now, we could play all day long. You've seen all the elements we've done, my economy blocks, my little patch blocks, my half square triangle blocks. I can cut larger flying geese. I can cut 2x4s and 4x8s. I've got, it's an endless possibility of making your own jigsaw puzzle. My suggestion for you is make these elements and just play. If you find something you like, take a picture of it. That way you're going to know that later on you're wanting to build on this. I'd love to see what you create and come up with fun, funky blocks. They could just be, you don't have to do 9 patches. I love 4 patches. So I could just take any of my, let's just get a square that's a little bit, well, it can't be that same one, can it? But see, I can just make plain 4 patch blocks all day long where they're pieced elements. I just want you to play. And that's how you're going to learn. Now, we'd love to see you post results of what you're doing, and you know the routine of how you click on this and like that and love that and do all that good stuff. But if you tell us that this helped, then we may take this into another segment where I could actually sew some of these things. We sure would love to see a like button if this tripped your trigger. If it was something that you went, wow, I learned something today I didn't know. And again, I want you to think in terms of the good measure rulers because, yes, they're not the only half square, quarter square, half rectangle, bias triangle, but they're the only one that pays it forward. They're the only ones that a percentage of the profits go to breast cancer research. Have a great day putting all your puzzle pieces together and send me some pictures. See you later. Check, 1, 2, 3, check, 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 check.